When ransomware attacks a school, you get detention. This is my talk. I'm Dennis Labossiere, and one of the B-sides I went to earlier this year, someone said, tell me what you're going to tell me, and then tell me what you told me. So that's kind of what the content is going to be here. We're going to talk about me for one slide and hopefully 5 seconds. We're going to talk about the WIFM. I'll give you an overview of the agenda. We'll get right into the investigation. We'll talk about the methodology. I'll wrap that up with tell me what you told me, if time, Q&A, and then the thank yous. So who am I? I'm Dennis Labossiere. I'm a manager within KPMG cyber response practice. I have 8 years experience in digital forensics incident response, all with KPMG. I have a bachelor's and a master's, if that matters to people. I have a few certifications, if that matters to people as well. To me, they're just pieces of paper that say, hey, I can do something pretty good. So I have a passion for ransomware investigations, hence my first presentation ever at a conference being here at ResponderCon about ransomware. Thank you. And buzzword galore will be in this slide deck because why not? Threat hunting, detection engineering is also a passion of mine that's really come up lately. If you wanted to know a little bit about me, I am a husband and a father. Recently, I have a 16-month-old boy. I'm a former D3 collegiate baseball player and a glamour camper because I like electricity and air conditioning. And yeah, again, first presentation. So let's get right into it. The WIFM. What's in it for me? Well, we all have something to learn. That was one of the biggest things that I got taught when I first joined KPMG. Funny enough, we were talking about carbon black entering the game a few years ago, and I was on a case where that was the EDR of choice, and I was like, how can I contribute to the team while learning this product? And it was, well, how many people on the team have actually used carbon black? And no one rose their hand. So I became a subject matter expert in a few months, did a couple of lunch and learns on the topic, and that's how I can contribute. So we all have something to learn. Reminder here, and we'll talk about it. This is the big point about this talk is telemetry. What do we have available to us in an investigation aside from an endpoint, right? Host logs on an endpoint exist, but there's also the firewall, there's also EDR data, there's conversations with the IT staff and the customer as well. So we got to leverage all of that telemetry in order to really paint a picture. We'll refresh some attacker TTPs or tactics, techniques, and procedures, and we'll map them to MITRE because that's a pretty common framework for TTP mapping. Maybe you'll learn a new skill or you'll learn a lot of new things, or this will just be an overview of everything you already know. And hopefully we'll have a few laughs, stories from the trenches. So today's agenda, I'm going to provide you a background out of a ransomware attack that we codenamed Project Detention, detailing the who, what, and when. Next, we'll describe the methodology and available telemetry to us that allowed us to investigate this incident in its entirety, including host-based data, firewall data, real huge points of data exfiltration, and EDR. We'll discuss various attacker TPs, including ntds.dit dumping, which comes from the domain controller. It's how you get credentials. We'll talk about some anti-forensic behavior that was observed during the attack by the attackers. We'll discuss various methods of data exfiltration. And then there is a little nugget there about an overview of a PowerShell script that we wrote. Thanks to the attacker for leaving that behind, we were able to grab it, recreate it, and use it for our purposes to figure out what they stole. And again, we'll go over the TTPs, map them to MITRE, because that's pretty common. So, investigation and background. Attack time frame, December 12th, 2021 through December 17th, 2021. So, we're not talking very long ago here, that this attack's still going on or went on and occurred. Attribution. Again, I think Harlan pointed out, it doesn't really matter when you're doing this, and to be honest, I didn't care who did this, but Microsoft made it pretty easy when they said, hey, it's the Zeppelin ransomware, and we looked it up and found that the Vice Society, or the ransom note that we found was linked to Vice Society. Now, does that mean Vice Society did this? No. Does that mean it's really Zeppelin ransomware? No. But hey, people want attribution, there you go, that's what we saw. Again, doesn't really matter to us. We're still going to investigate the ransomware the same way, whether it was Conti or Zeppelin. And if you must know, the client is in the state and local government sector. I think it said school district. I think we could all agree that that's what you're going to get. And a little caveat here, where appropriate, as always, we have redacted or implicitly changed client information to keep this anonymous, and that allowed me to present here today by doing that. Otherwise, I don't think this would have passed risk management. Methodology, as I had mentioned, what's the methodology to investigating a ransomware attack? As Harlan, your talk was pretty much about, we don't care what the executable does because the end goal of that executable is the ransomware. We know that happened. We came in after the fact. So how do we investigate the who, what, and when? So starting with the facts, we know ransomware is deployed. Where do we start? Well, we'll start with attacker frequent targets, those high-value targets, domain controllers, exchange servers, file shares, you name it. Those high-value targets are what we're going to go after first, and we'll do that by leveraging our patented forensic triage and collection tool called KDR, or KPMG Digital Responder. And we'll ask the client, or we'll do it through EDR, hey, can you run this on these 8, 10 systems? And that'll allow us to have all that data in one place for us to do the investigation. And from there, after we get that data, we'll work on root cause and lateral movement. So how did they get in the environment, and what did they do when they were in the environment? Well, you can only do that once you have the data, of course. So we divide the project basically into 2 work streams in the forensic analysis. We say point in time here, go backwards, and point in time here, go forward. So root cause analysis is obviously huge. That gets you the who and the when, or the when and the what. And figuring out what they did after. So that point in time could be from conversations you have with the client to say, hey, we noticed this anomaly at this blip or this time, or this blip in the firewall at this time, or we have the ransom note, when was that created, go point in time backwards, or we have a compromised user account, see when that first logged into any system, go backward from there. But basically that's the methodology. Divide the project into 2 work streams, point in time backwards, point in time forward. And then, key here is, looking for lateral movement outside of business hours. This was a school, so they're, pretty much, 7 to 2 p.m., 7 to 3 p.m. And look for quick wins. Service installs event ID 7045 in the system event log, 4697 in the security event log. Any malicious PowerShell activity, if you're lucky enough to have script block locking enabled at 4104, you can see decrypted encoded commands. Or scheduled task creations, again, event ID 106. Those are huge, quick wins to look for, and that's, the point in time I was talking about. Again, all telemetry. So what did we have available to us? Well, we had the endpoint data. Obviously, we had, 8 to 10 systems. Overall, I think in this case, we had about 86 systems we collected data from endpoints to domain controllers to just file servers, etc. Network data, the client was kind enough to give us direct access to their Palo Alto firewall, so we were able to do querying rather than having to export all that, because Palo's Pagnation exports kind of really stink if you have to go through 100 pages to get the data you want. So with direct access, we're able to get queries specific and export that data off. And then EDR. In this case, the client did not have one, so we thought we'll get into that. But we deployed Sentinel-1 to them during this incident, and we're able to leverage Sentinel-1's hunting and their AI/ML to detect a lot of things that were still on disk, but pull back files, run additional KDR packages, etc. And then identify common or compromised user accounts and their SIDs. Now that's important. It's not enough to just know that X user did something. You want to map that back to their security identifier or their SID, because there are some event logs that don't log usernames, they log the SID. So if you're just tracking usernames, you won't find all that information. So you want their security identifier. That will be unique to them, and it'll be everywhere. So once you have that, you can figure out, hey, did this user log into this system and dump credentials? Did they run PowerShell? Did they create persistence? And then one of the biggest pieces of advice I received early in my career is, do you see the forest through the trees? So if you're investigating a host or multiple hosts, are you just looking at trees in a forest, or are you looking at the forest through the trees? So a big part and a differentiator between DF and IR is looking at multiple hosts at the same time for the same activity. So RDP activity, do you see that across 100 hosts, or are you looking at just one host and seeing something here? But can you correlate that across many at scale? So do you see the forest through the trees? And then if you get frustrated, remember, you can't boil the ocean. So let's talk about dumping credentials. So how do attackers dump passwords? If anyone was here in the morning, they use a variety of tools. Dump LSAS, Mimikat, or the NTDS DIT file from the domain controller. But have you ever seen somebody dump a Veeam backup software, the service account? Have you seen them do that with PowerShell? Well, I've got some news for you. We're going to show it. So, as I said, we observed this, the Veeam service account having interactive logons to systems. Now, granted, that account is supposed to have logon activity to systems. That's how it connects, gets the telemetry to do the backup. But this is an interactive session, right? Not a type 2, right? We're talking type 3 or type 10 logon with this service account. So, red flag alert is waving in my head right now. That is bad. So one of our analysts had asked, probably 3-4 days in the investigation, hey, Dennis, do you know how the attacker got the password for this account? Any number of ways, sure, let's NTDS DIT, the LSAS, Mimikatz. He goes, I think I know how they did it. Call me. Let's talk. So they actually did this with MS SQL. And you can find this online because it's published on Veeam's website as a valid method of obtaining the credentials for the Veeam account, which, by the way, is an admin account. It's a service account, so high privileges. So right here is the first query you need to run, and it's a SQL query. Give me the top 1,000 ID, username, password, blah, 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 blah. By the way, there will be a demo of this, but this is just on the screen so you can see the commands. Then there's a series of 3 PowerShell one-line commands you will enter, and you will get the plain text password for this account. So there they are. Add type path, give it a path of a DLL in the Veeam backup software, take your encoded string that you get from the SQL command, and then decode the encoded string, and you get the plain text password. So as promised, I'll have a demo, and I didn't pray the demo gods, so it's pre-recorded. So here you go. Here's MS SQL running Veeam. Here's the query. It runs automatically down below. You'll get a listing. It's a little tough to read, so I'm going to highlight it here for you. That's the row we're worried about, where you get an encoded base64 string for Veeam admin account. That's it. Okay. Next video, we'll run the PowerShell command, like I said. Add type path, give it the path to the DLL, and we're done. Now that's stored in memory as a variable. We'll move on. The next video won't play for whatever reason, and we'll move into the third one where we do add that encoded string, huge base64 line, we'll decode it, and there you go. This is a password with A being an @ sign, and I will put it back up for all you lovely people here. And automatically, boom, there it is, plain text password. That's how they got the password for that account to use and move laterally before they got other accounts and other privileged access to other systems. As simple as 4 commands on one system. All right. We also noticed that they dumped the ntds.dit file. This is a file on your primary domain controller. I believe it's also on all domain controllers. And it is the authoritative source for all user, computer objects, passwords, anything you do about credentializing is done with the DIT file. Stores, like I said, it stores your computer objects, stores your user objects, and their passwords. So attackers commonly like to grab these and exfil them so that they can crack the passwords to either use in this attack or other attacks to build their dictionaries. So there's the command right there, by the way, that they used in this attack to do this. ntds util, ACI, ntds, ifm, create full, dump it to C users public, dump, quiet, QQ. And here's a timeline of this activity of what it looks like when you put all the telemetry you have available to you together. So security event logs, user journal, MFT, application event log, all there to show you in temporal order how this happened and what it looks like to really paint a picture. Now, I gotta give credit where credit is due to Richard Davis of 13 Cubed. Fantastic resource and a timely video of his on ntds.dit theft that came out roughly December 19th, 20th or something like that. And it was racking my brain. So take away the application event log entries, and that's the timeline that I had. And I'm like, there's gotta be something else that just solidifies this even more. I mean, there's already 4 or 5 pieces of forensic evidence that tells us this happened. But really, how did this happen? How were they able to do that? And his video came out probably that morning, but I didn't see it until probably 10 p.m. at night. Watched the video, queried the entire 88 hosts that we had collected for those event IDs, and came up with 7 hits on this one system. And here's the most relevant pieces of that. The event ID 325 that shows you they dumped it not once, but twice. And they saved it to 2 different locations. So, anti-forensic behavior, because they actually did like to clean up by themselves, anti-forensic, so that they liked to make our lives a little bit more difficult. Aside from just ransomware everything and burning it to the ground, they also decided that they would obfuscate a little bit of what they did or make some of the tooling in place harder to use. And one of the common ways they like to do this is to bypass Windows Defender. This is a very common tactic by ransomware gangs or any threat actor. It's not unique to Vice Society in any way, just very common tactic. And again, PowerShell being leveraged heavily here. Here's a bunch of one-liners that were used in PowerShell to render Windows Defender on an endpoint pretty much useless that point in time forward. So anything before then was fine, was written to the event logs. Anything else after that was not getting detected, was not getting stopped, and what have you. So, just real quick, disabling the anti-spyware, antivirus, their MP engine, and real-time protection. Well, on top of that, if you wanted to detect this, Microsoft made it pretty easy where they give you 3 event IDs in their event logs to detect this activity from occurring. These event log records will tell you if the real-time protection, anti-spyware, or antivirus engines were turned off. So if you're looking to monitor for this activity in your environment, here's 3 event IDs for you. If you're looking to detect this activity in your environment, there's all the commands for you. And the slides are public, by the way, and so they will be published. On top of that, because they know that these things get written to event logs, they like to clear the event log. And to be honest with you, the only way we were able to see this with all the telemetry that we had or brought in was because on 2 systems, for whatever reason, the client had sysmon running. And sysmon logged the commands entered to clear the event log, and they're pretty trivial. There you go. WinEVT util, CL for clear log, and then give it the log name. Security, system, application. The 3 pretty critical ones that you would need in an investigation. They cleared them on a majority of hosts, but again, we were only able to see this because 2 hosts in the environment had sysmon running, again, for whatever reason. I think when we interviewed the IT guy, he said it was just for testing purposes, and I was like, you probably should have deployed that wide. So, Xfil. Everyone wants to know about Xfil. That's really the big question, right? I work for a professional consulting firm, and doing these investigations does cost thousands and thousands of dollars. But at the end of the day, what you really get out of that, 15 to 20 page paper that tells you what happened, and really most people are reading the first 4 pages of that, the title, the agenda, and then the executive summary, which may be 2 pages. And that's it. Everything else is really for the technical people, but again, they're not really existing in this world. That's why we have job security. So the big question here, though, is did data exfil occur? And in this case, it did, and it was unfortunately pretty massive, but fortunately pretty easy to tell. So again, one of the most important topics when we perform investigations is exfiltration. So did it occur? Is there proof without negotiating or engaging the threat actor? What was taken? Is there proof without engaging or negotiating with the threat actor? If we have proof, what is next? So you got to inform outside counsel because they drive everything, assuming this is under outside counsel. In this case, it was. If one exists, check the leak site. And then sometimes in the case, they may underreport the data that was actually taken. So in this case, I believe the threat actors claimed they took 650 gigabytes of data. Our analysis showed that was more around 900 gigabytes of data. So 650 may have been deduped, but we also know that they took roughly 58 user PSTs, and we found that between event logs and some of the other logs. And on their leak site, only 40 of those were published. So we do know that they didn't have all the data up there, which was a strong push to not pay because you're not going to get all your data back. And then obviously perform additional analysis to determine the common questions: what, when, where, how. And then again, like I said, they made this pretty easy for us. So circling back to that PowerShell script that I was talking about, and I'll actually blow this up here real quick. Here's the first 34 lines of that PowerShell script. And as you can see at the top, maybe not on this side because there are some barriers in place, but over on this side of the room, on the top you can see an ID and token string of Harry Potter. All that meant was you had to pass that as a parameter to access the website. They had a hard-coded IP address, port, and full URL. That's where the data was being stolen and uploaded right there. So what did I do? I ran and plugged that into the firewall. Tell me everything that's talking to that IP address. Also, when I told you about flipping, this script, this is the script I was talking about that we use for our. So we just took their code, didn't upload it and send it outside, and wrote to CSVs, and we had a list of everything that they took. Right? So what were they looking for? And again, I will make sure that these little pillars of code, become a little bit more visible. But they're looking for anything and everything. Blackmail, HR, payroll data. It doesn't matter to them. They want it all. And it doesn't matter if it's in English or if it's in Spanish, because they're looking for both languages in both words. So human resources or recursos humanos, they're looking for, it doesn't matter. That's what they're looking for. And when I mean blackmail, porn, sex, doesn't matter. In file names. That's what they're looking for. So, there you go. Doesn't really blow it up much more, but this was a massive list. I think all in all, in lines of code, it was probably about 400 lines of code just because of everything that they had put in this list. So, on the following 2 slides, as I had just mentioned, we plugged this IP address into the firewall to give us back everything that was talking to that IP address. And the culminating timeline is a result of that for all successful connections. And I try to be nice in presentations and give the firewall query that was used in Palo. So receive time is greater than 1211 at 22 or 1211 21 0000 UTC, and less than 1216 0000 UTC. And then where the ad address destination is the 5273, which was from the PowerShell script. The 146.70 IP was a ping IP. So they used that to test that the system had a network connection and then exfil to the other IP address. So here's slide 1. Again, redacted information in terms of the host names, but basically we're looking at host name, where was it talking to, when did the firewall first see a record of this, where that PowerShell script was run on that host, where was the first entry in the PowerShell script log for that. Then we flip to the last scene, and we go to bytes, and in total bytes, and then gigabytes sent. And you can see some of these hosts. One is over 320 gigs sent out. Moving on to the other 20 hosts. So 41 hosts in total. Again, roughly around 600, 700 gigs. Moving into Mega. Mega is similar to rclone, used for data exfiltration, file sharing, all that fun stuff. Mega was actually dropped on as an executable, and it has, kind of like Dropbox, was used here. So we identified on Exchange 3 in that path, this file or the logs existed. And again, in Mega, approximately an additional 73 gigs of data was taken, mostly, or actually all PST files. So here's the firewall query we used to identify anything related to Mega in Palo. And the timeline of events here for the data exfiltration in terms of bytes, and then mapping that over to gigabytes so we can determine size. And you can see one host had about 408, or that's megabytes, sorry, 408 megabytes being sent out. So moving into the command that they use to do this, they used this PowerShell command, new mailbox export request, and created a time filter and dumped per username to a specific path. And then here's a little bit of a timeline for you of that activity, where we get the user assist activity, we get the MFT records, and then there's a lovely little exchange event log here that logged a lot of this activity that shows you where the paths were. So the Mega logs, which most people are probably more interested in where they exist, and we were able to grab those logs, parse them with Linux. I used WSL in this case. Here's the command that was used. So go back, zgrep upload complete star on the logs, and here's the result. And you can see that in this log, 14 PSTs, and obviously redacted them, 14 PSTs were exfilled in that one log. PowerShell script reversal. So again, like I told you, we took that PowerShell script and said instead, hey, sending it to the bad guy, let's write it to disk. So we cleaned up a lot of their code, refactored a lot of it, made it better for us, wrote it all to CSVs and said, here you go, here's everything that they took. Now you can notify people because you kind of have to do that. And we did this with outside counsel's permission, actually by their direction. They said to do this. So real quick, looking at the side-by-side here of the two scripts, you can see that our code is a lot easier to understand and a lot safer for everyone else. As I had mentioned, I'll map it all to MITRE. I won't have time to go through all of the mappings, but found in this presentation, here's the slides. Here are the MITRE tactics or techniques leveraged with their TIDs. Remember slide 8 was the first slide I had put up with the Zeppelin attribution. So that's where it kind of starts. And then we'll talk about what we observed during the analysis. Again, I'm going to exclude, as you can see at the footer, invoke session gopher and powersploit. Both were used in this case, but that really would have flooded out the tactics and techniques, and those are specific tools that were leveraged, but these were the true tactics that we observed by the threat actor, not their tooling. And then, as I mentioned, I'll do a little heat map bar graph. So the dark blue are the total techniques in that tactic, and then the light blue are the ones that we observed, so the number of techniques we observed in that tactic. So pretty low and slow, you can see here, and some of these tactics are pretty heavy. So tell me what you told me, tell me what you're gonna tell me, and then tell me what you told me. So wrapping up here, some of the observables and IOCs, people love those. Well, here you go. And then we'll move into the wrap up. So I provided a background of the ransomware investigation. We codenamed it Project Detention. School district, we're funny, detailing the who, what, and when. We described the methodology and available telemetry to us. That was point in time forward, point in time backwards, root cause analysis. The telemetry was obviously the endpoint data, the firewall data, your EDR data. We discussed the various attacker TTPs, including but not limited to the NTDS DIT dumping, anti-forensics, and exfiltration. We overviewed how we took the attacker script, rewrote it for the better, and for the client, and then went over all those TTPs and mapped them to the MITRE framework. That is my presentation. Anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
So what did you tell the school district to do to stop this from happening again?
Yeah, so recommendations are a huge part of our presentation or final report that we give. So we do believe that the initial root cause of this was through a VDI infrastructure with a Log4j vulnerability, but we had no evidence of that because that infrastructure was burned down to the ground with the ransomware. So basically we told them, you can't use VDI anymore, and if you do, you gotta really patch it. So patching was a huge thing. Talking about more detections in place, we do understand that they're a school district and that may not be in budget, but there's really only so much that could have been done in this case to prevent that. No one's gonna not run Veeam now because their help page has that. It's the legit instructions. So like you can't say, hey, you can't use Veeam anymore because they store their passwords encoded that you can decode. So yeah, I mean, we basically just told them like, look, that root cause, you've got to nip that in the head and figure out a new way for that to exist. You've really got to think about how credential access works in your environment for accounts to move and work on building detections. I do believe that they bought SentinelOne after the fact. So they have an EDR in place as opposed to just relying on Windows Defender and then Sysmon on a system or two. So the standard, sucks, but here's a little bit of what you can do.
Two questions. The mega upload, were they uploading to like the mega.nz and so on? So putting that in place as a block might have stopped at least that part of the upload?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of their tools were definitely in just detect mode and not block, for sure. Yeah, so that will definitely help out, being a little bit more aware of your traffic in your environment and what's talking to what. Is this system really supposed to be talking to the internet? As we mentioned, like a domain controller really shouldn't be running a web browser, right, and downloading data per se. So some stuff like that, yeah, they were uploading to Mega. I think we use the app naming convention as opposed to the IPs. As in the logs, we saw, I think, 100 unique IPs for Mega. So we use the application naming by Palo, and it's pretty solid.
When we have, when you listen to webinars on how to protect against ransomware, one of the common pieces of advice is to block large uploads, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those generic pieces of advice that, kind of like, oh, you should patch everything. That's not wrong,
mm-hmm.
but actually not helpful. In their specific case, if you were looking for, hey, you should block large uploads, what would you have been able to recommend? Anything over 50 gigs or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, well, it's a school, so large uploads could happen all the time. So yeah, I mean, so the question was, would you recommend blocking large uploads or at least monitoring for it? Yeah, I mean, obviously that's obviously a great recommendation to look for, but that's a use by use case because it's not a one size fits all, as we probably all well know. Especially in the schools where large data is maybe moving all the time, students interacting online with the VDIs, etc. So, yeah, I'd be remiss to say, thank you to my wife and the KPMG family as well with the last slide here, and then just some contact information.
Awesome. All right.